Today on Eye on Northwest Politics, Oregon Congressman Blumenauer is here, weighing in on the ouster of Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. 8 Republicans and all the Democrats voted to give McCarthy the boot. Blumenauer, a Democrat, dives into what's happening in the House of Representatives and the urgency to get a budget deal done before a possible government shutdown. Plus, cybersecurity scares. Should the U.S. be spying on the electronic communications of foreigners to keep Americans safe? Portland FBI Special Agent in Charge Kieran Ramsey is here, making the case for international surveillance. Eye on Northwest Politics starts now. Thanks for joining us. This is Eye on Northwest Politics. I'm Ken Body. This week's top political headline, a possible big break for cannabis businesses. The Safer Banking Act, co-sponsored by Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley, passed through committee in the Senate. The bill will allow marijuana businesses to use banks. Since cannabis has been legal in Oregon and Washington state, dispensaries are blocked from using banks because of federal rules. That's why most dispensaries only accept cash. However, the bill still faces an uphill battle in the Republican-controlled House, which is in the news for another reason this week. The historic ouster of House Speaker Kevin McCarthy this week has halted all legislative business in the U.S. House of Representatives. House Republicans choose a new leader next week and hopefully get back to business with a budget deadline looming. Oregon Congressman Blumenauer has a bird's eye view to the happenings in the House. Elected to the U.S. House in 1996, Congressman Blumenauer represents Oregon's 3rd Congressional District. Thank you very much for being here on Eye on Northwest Politics, Congressman.
My pleasure.
Well, all the Democrats in the House voted to remove McCarthy, including yourself. Why?
Well, he simply has refused to work with us. He opened up this bogus effort to impeach President Biden. No evidence whatsoever. They couldn't even agree on why they were impeaching him. Sort of an act of bad faith, but it just continues the process of not being serious about governing, not willing to reach out on a bipartisan basis to be able to get the job done. And we've been flirting with this serious problem dealing with the government shutdown and the notion of being able to put us on a sound fiscal basis. Democrats have had enough.
Well, you know, the Republicans have a slim majority in the House, 4 seats, I believe it is. Can the Democrats do any work while you wait for the Republicans to choose a new speaker?
No. Under the rules of the House, until there is a speaker selected, no business can be conducted. It's just like starting the session over again, and the first thing that happens in a new Congress is the selection of the speaker. So that grinds everything to a halt. We hope they'll be able to get their act together, but time will tell.
The vote against McCarthy puts you in a strange position. It puts you, in terms of the vote, on the same team as Republican Matt Gaetz and the 7 other Republicans who voted to oust McCarthy. Was that a tough position to be in? Was there any consideration on the Democratic side to go and vote to keep McCarthy in?
There were efforts to reach out to Speaker McCarthy to be able to make some changes that would allow the House to function. For instance, they have put some of the most extreme people on the Rules Committee that prevents us from being able to move forward. They were unwilling to be able to make an adjustment so that the House could function. Unless and until there's an act of good faith, we're not going to rescue them from their own dysfunction.
Well, part of the reason those House Republicans voted McCarthy out is that he did work with the Democrats somewhat to keep the continuing resolution going, to keep the government running. Now there's another deadline to prevent a government shutdown. That's on November 17th. So what still needs to be negotiated for a budget deal?
Well, they have to be able to take yes for an answer. We have an outline of a budget deal that was approved by the House Republicans, the Senate in both parties, President Biden. We had a deal. That's when we were able to avoid the debt ceiling default. We set the parameters for what the budget would be, agreed on the numbers. The Senate's been working on that on a bipartisan basis. Republicans refused to honor their part of the agreement.
The continuing resolution separated out funding for Ukraine, so Congress will likely have to vote on that separately, correct? What's your stance on continuing aid to Ukraine?
Well, it's absolutely essential. The Ukrainians are fighting against Russian aggression, repeated atrocities that we've seen in terms of what they've done to civilians. This was entirely unnecessary, unprovoked, and cruel. It's actually united people in Europe in ways we've not seen before, in terms of Germany being involved, Sweden, Finland. These countries understand the threat that is posed by Russia and have been working with us to try and be able to stabilize and strengthen our European allies.
Two names keep rising to the top of the list for House Speaker, Steve Scalise of Louisiana, Jim Jordan of Ohio. Do you have a preference, or is this the Republicans' problem?
Well, I've tried to work with both with very limited success, and they have demonstrated no interest in working with Democrats. There may be others that surface before we're done. But again, they're going to have to figure out who is going to be in charge. And to this point, it's been chaos on the Republican side.
When you're looking at it from across the aisle and you see what's going on with the Republicans, what do you think in terms of its overall effect on governance?
It's terrible. It's terrible. I have a number of Republican friends. Every piece of legislation I move forward with starts as bipartisan legislation. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with Republicans that are frustrated with what's going on. But they're mystified and they're not willing to stand up to be able to defy their hard right people. I hope that changes. We'll keep our fingers crossed because the American public deserves better.
I know we're not a southern border state, but one of the things that happened this week was that President Biden, he cleared the way for Texas to create more border wall because of what's happening on the Rio Grande and the number of people who are coming into the country across the Rio Grande. What do you think about that?
Well, I think what we need to have is comprehensive immigration reform. You may recall in 2013, the Senate, on a bipartisan basis, sent us a proposal to reform the immigration system. We need those people working with us in our healthcare, our hospitality, construction, and agriculture. But the speaker at the time, the Republican speaker at the time, wouldn't allow the House to vote on it. And as long as we're sort of spinning around, unable to have comprehensive immigration reform, we're going to continue to have problems at the border. We need those workers to be able to strengthen our economy, and people who need the right to be able to flee oppression and for a better life. There's a deal to be made here. We came close 10 years ago. I hope someday we can do it again.
You're co-chair of the Cannabis Caucus, and we talked with Senator Merkley earlier this week about the Safer Banking Act that's moving out of committee into the Senate, as we mentioned. Are we getting closer to cannabis businesses here in Oregon having access to banking services? It's almost $1 billion industry here in Oregon.
Absolutely, and it's essential. It makes no sense at all that legitimate enterprises, it's over a $30 billion business nationally. It poses a public safety risk. We've passed the Safe Banking Bill 7 times in the House. And up till now, it's been blocked by the Republican leadership in the Senate. Now, Senator Wyden, Senator Schumer, Senator Merkley have been able to develop a path forward. I'm optimistic that it'll pass. The American public needs it. This is a growing industry. It's important for Oregonians, and it's important nationally.
Obviously, being from here, you recognize the problem that we're having with fentanyl here in Portland and across the state, really. What's your thought about how we deal with that problem as it seems to be getting worse and worse and more out in the open?
Yeah. Well, again, it's a national problem. You know, we can't keep fentanyl out of our prisons. Most of the fentanyl is carried across the border by American citizens. We know that. We've got a serious problem in terms of being able to scale that down. We need to have treatment for people who are addicted. We need to make sure that we're not allowing open, notorious use on the streets. And we need to crack down on people who are openly and notoriously trafficking. It's it is going to be, it's a tall order, but we're going to have to work together to try and get this done.
Last question before we go. How many times have you ridden your bike across the Earl Blumenauer Bridge over Interstate 84, the bridge that's named after you?
Not enough. I really love it. It's great, particularly what we've seen in this weekend, watching families be out and enjoying it. It's been a great connection in the Central East Side, and it's a pretty handsome bridge.
Yes, it is a pretty good-looking bridge. Thank you very much, Congressman Earl Blumenauer. We appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Coming up next, we are going to talk to the